90% of the world's millionaires own real estate, so why not just invest in real estate? There's always an obstacle between success and failure, or mediocrity and extraordinary, and you need to figure out what that obstacle is and jump over it. I think it's really important to realize that your first deal isn't going to necessarily be your best deal. Half of the first deal is just getting in the game to show everybody else that you're credible and you're even worth talking to. The worst thing you can do is do the same thing as everybody else.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Agent to Investor podcast, where we talk about the agent side of real estate investing. We'll be talking about the successes, the failures, and all in between. My name is Nico Garcia, local real estate agent and investor based out of Montgomery County, Maryland. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host,
Anna by Lake, Northern Virginia realtor and mostly out-of-state investor.
And today we're joined by another great guest. We have Mr. Craig Curelop. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Nico, Anna, thanks so much for having me.
We're very excited to have you come on. I know we met at BPCon last year. So Craig is an agent. He is an investor. He's a house hacker. He's a podcaster and a whole lot of other things. But before we go into it, you mind giving a quick introduction about you and where you're from and what initially got you into real estate?
Yeah, so what originally got me into real estate is I'm not from California, but I was living in California. I had to preface it and say that. I was living in California, working in Silicon Valley at the time, and I had a job that I hated in this finance role where I was working 60, 80, 100-hour weeks, getting paid the same salary no matter what, and kind of looked to my future and was like, I don't think this is the way. I don't want to spend the next 40 years here. If I did advance in my job, I just end up 30 feet down the hallway in the same place, talking with just people younger than me, and I just didn't want to be there. And so I started to figure out and try to understand ways. How do people retire early? How do the wealthy get wealthy? And what I ultimately stumbled upon was 90% of the world's millionaires own real estate. So why not just invest in real estate? And it took me a while to stumble on real estate, but eventually I ended up there. And so then I started reading the books. I started reading some BiggerPockets books. I started listening to the BiggerPockets podcast. And then I was like, I need to figure out how to get in with this BiggerPockets company. And so I started looking for jobs. And there was nothing available at BiggerPockets at the time other than engineer, which I could not do. And so I ended up going on a trip to South America where I used all my PTO, calibrated it just right over the holidays so I could take 5 weeks off, and was like, okay, I need to get into real estate no matter what. And so that next weekend I came home from the trip, I applied to 250 jobs in one weekend. And I applied to 249 were real estate agent assistant for $8 or $10 an hour in Florida. And the remaining, in the last one, was a job at BiggerPockets in Denver as their finance analyst, because the job posted got between the first time and the second time I looked, the new job was there as a finance analyst. That I could do. So I applied to that job. And if you know my story at all, the ending, I ended up at BiggerPockets and moved to Denver. And then within a month of moving to Denver, I was in my first house hack living there. So that's kind of how I got started.
Wow. Okay. So did you have any family members, or did you have anyone in your growing up that was into real estate, or was this truly, I know I'm not happy and I need to find an exit strategy before I am old and retiring?
No, I had no family. In fact, my family members were quite against real estate because my uncle lost a lot of money in the 80s. But I actually didn't know that until I started getting into it. And no, I had not really any family type mentors. The way that I stumbled upon it was that I ran the internship program at that job that I hated. And one of my interns, their dad, retired off of a 9-unit building that he owned free and clear after, I think he worked for, some company, UPS or one of those companies that went public or something. And he basically cashed in, bought a 9-plex, and now he was 45 and retired. And I was like, oh, that's pretty sweet. And so I got coffee with him or lunch or something, and he kind of gave me a little bit of a rundown. And I remember him vividly saying why don't you follow my blog, follow my podcast, read my book? And he's like, just kidding, I don't do any of that stuff. Here I am with a blog, with a podcast, with a book. But he was the first guy that I ever talked to in real estate, saw that it exists. And then what's that effect called when you see something and then you see it everywhere? You see your car everywhere is the prime example that is always used. I forget what it's called, but
reticular
activating system. Yeah, that's what it is. Yep. And so then that goes off in my head, right? And then I'm like, oh, I go and look at the landlord that I was paying rent to, and we lived in a 20-unit complex outside of San Jose State. And I would give this lady a check every month for $2,000. And then I would see her come over every month and have a stack of checks. And I was like, whoa, 2,000 times 20, that's 40,000. Did she just really collect $40,000? And then like my mind just was like, okay, this seems like it's the way. And then I started doing all that research, and that's where it all came from.
Yeah, that's awesome, Craig. And it's common that people get into that, what is that, analysis paralysis. They're reading a lot of books, but you had a goal and you really wanted to, you took your 5 weeks in South America, which is pretty awesome. And then you came back, you had a goal. You said, whatever I got to do to get into it. And you landed a job with BiggerPockets. For those who don't know, BiggerPockets is one of the biggest online communities geared towards real estate investing. And talk to us about that first deal. I know you talk a lot about house hacking. And for those who don't know what house hacking is, you mind talking about your first house hack and how you came about doing that?
Yeah, let me set the stage a little bit. So it's 2017 and I'm 24 years old and I'm single. Okay. So I knew at the time I would never be any younger, and I would never have anyone at any other point in time in life. I'm probably going to have someone else depending on me. And I was firmly aware that I needed to take advantage of being like single and young and have a very low tolerance for standards of living. And so I went in and I bought a duplex, and I knew nothing about anything when it came to rehab. So I bought something that was totally rehabbed and totally turnkey. It was 1.5 miles from the office. So I biked almost every day to work. And if I couldn't bike, if it was snowing, I would walk. Like I literally would always not use a car to save money for transportation there. What's cool about this place is that, again, it was an up-down duplex. I lived in the bottom, rented out the top. And at the time, that was really the only way of house hacking. There were other ways, but no one really knew about any other way except doing a 2, 3, or 4 unit property. And so I thought duplex was the only way. And in Denver at the time, it was almost impossible to really cash flow a multifamily property that way. We had just gotten past the point of being able to find cash flowing multifamily properties. And so I was living in the bottom, renting out the top, and I didn't quite cover my mortgage. My mortgage was like $2,000, and I was renting the top out for $1,750. And I was very determined to live for free. That was my goal. And so what I did was I ended up Airbnb-ing my bedroom out, which ended up being about $1,000 to $1,100 a month on Airbnb. And I made this very janky bedroom out of the living room with a like cardboard room divider and a curtain. And I slept in that 50 to 60 square foot space for a full year.
Talk about innovation, and just, it almost sounds like the Airbnb founder story. And I don't know if you had heard it at the time, but that's pretty amazing. And you're right. You were never going to be any younger. And if you had no one depending on you, that's the way to go for house hacking. If you're in that position in life, it gets a little tougher when you do get older and someone depends on you. And I guess that's where some of the house hacking creativity nowadays has come into play, but we can talk about that more later.
Yeah, my whole thought is if you're young and you're single and you've got that flexibility, use it. I was hardly ever home. I was hanging out with friends. I was actually like doing a lot of reading, a lot of studying. Like I was just at work a lot. I would just go into the office on the weekends and just work. And so I was in hustle and grind mode, and that allowed me to A, not spend money, and B, save a ton of money. And yeah.
So Craig, speaking of that first deal, you mind talking about how you financed that first duplex?
Yeah, so I used a 3.5% down FHA loan. Again, at the time, I didn't know of any other way. I didn't know about 3% down conventional or 5% down conventional. I just knew about the FHA. So I did that FHA loan, and I bought the property at the time for $385,000, put 3.5% down. I think my total all in after closing costs was like $17,000. And then I was living, my final numbers was that after I rented out that bedroom and set some money aside for reserves, I was cash flowing, like legitimately cash flowing $400 a month and not paying rent. So my net savings every month was probably $1,000 to $2,000 a month from what it was, on top of the fact that I was saving from my job. And this stuff started to stack pretty quickly at that point.
Yeah, such a powerful tool. I know you worked for BiggerPockets. Is that where you learned about that actual house hacking, or did you knew about it before?
I knew about it because I used to listen to the BiggerPockets podcast, and I definitely heard it from BiggerPockets and Brandon and all that. I think Brandon Turner wrote a blog article it was called something on the lines of how to hack your housing and live for free. And that is like the birth of how the house hacking term came to be. And so, yeah, it became a no-brainer strategy because like I can put 3.5% down on a house in an appreciating market like Denver, heck, in a non-appreciating market like anywhere else. The odds of that property appreciating 3.5% in a year is pretty dang high. So if that property appreciates 3.5% in a year and nothing else happens, no loan pay down, and no cash flow, I still get a 100% return on my investment. You can't do that with any other strategy. And then, of course, now that I'm living there, it's like the perfect training wheels for real estate investing. And I got the idea of the curtain and the room divider was because when I was living in San Francisco, I was living in a small bedroom in a condo where this woman who I'm still in touch with to this day, I call her my San Francisco mom, she was living behind the curtain in her living room with 2 kids, single mom, 2 kids. And so I was like, okay, if she can do it, and she was probably like 40, 45 at the time. If she could do it at 45 with 2 kids, I sure as heck could do it 24, no kids, no wife, nothing.
Yeah. When people, I don't want to say desperate, that's not the right word, but when they're put in, when the screws tighten, they get creative. She sounds like a prime example of that. I don't know if Nico has another question about this, but now I'm curious, like what happened next? Like how long were you in that situation for? And then what?
Yeah. So the first one came and went, and exactly 1 year later, I bought my second house. And this time I got smarter. This time I bought a single family house. It was I guess it was technically a 4-bed, 2-bath. I added a bedroom very easily to make it a 5-bed, 2-bath. And this I bought for $343,000, about 10 miles north of Denver and along a bike path. So I could still bike to work. It took about 45 minutes each way. And I lived in one room and rented out the others. And so with this strategy, my mortgage payment was about the same because I don't know if you remember, but in 2018, rates actually jumped to 5.125 or something. So my PITI on that was like 2,300. I later refinanced it to be around a little less than 2,000, but I was making $3,100 in rent while living there. And when I moved out, I was making like 37 or 3,800 in rent. And let's just say my mortgage was 2,000 for easy numbers. And you can see I was making like $1,800 a month over the mortgage. I was like, okay, this is the way to go. This is how you actually achieve financial independence a lot faster in a higher priced market. Because when I would hear people's stories about they're searching for $200 a door. And I'm like, $200 a door? Like water heater kills your cash flow for a year. And a water heater is not even your biggest expense. Like how many doors do you really need to achieve the freedom? It just seemed like so much work. And so, but with this, shoot, $1,500 a property. And my first property was renting out for $1,500 over the mortgage too. So about $1,000 of true cash flow. So if I could just buy 1 or 2 or more of these things, I'm basically financially free on $4,000 or $5,000 a month.
So Craig, and you just mentioned 2 different ways of house hacking, right? You mentioned the duplex, which is great because you don't have to share an actual kitchen and bathrooms with other tenants. But now you moved on to what's called co-living. You're living essentially with roommates. And I know you mentioned you were single, and I know a lot of people have that barrier. It's just being comfortable with living with strangers. It might not even be strangers. You might know some people that are interested in renting a room. But what would you say to the people that are, I don't know, scared, that are a little not ready to make that jump?
The like direct person in me just says, suck it up. But the real reason why you should suck it up is that there's always an obstacle, a big obstacle between success and failure, or like mediocrity and extraordinary. And you need to figure out what that obstacle is and jump over it. And so in my brain, I was like, what am I willing to do now that most people are not willing to do? And so at the time, most people were not willing to live behind a curtain, right? And I knew that would be part of my story. Second, I was like, okay, I didn't want to do that for much longer. So then I moved on to that house. And I was like, most people still are not wanting to live with 4 other people. I'm sorry, at 24, I think maybe I was 25 when I closed in the second one. In what world did I deserve that comfort? I hadn't achieved anything. I hadn't saved anything. And like, to me, any 24, 25-year-old that thinks they deserve that or they need that, I think are totally full of crap. Like, you don't deserve it. And then you can take your comfort now and you can suffer later, or you can suffer now and have comfort for the rest of your life. So figure out you just got to understand when do you want to pay?
Yeah.
Right.
I love that mentality. Some people are just, I don't know, my husband, this is going to offend someone. My husband would probably call them snowflakes. He's like, come on, suck it up in the beginning. So what you said, you didn't know much about house hacking with the first one. What was the turning point? Was it because you had the curtain? Was that the experience that led you to the rent by the room scenario in the single family home? And then in the single family home? Were they short-term rental, midterm rental? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's funny. The reason why I found out the co-living and rent by room was because my friend was doing it. And he always jokes, he's like, bro, you took my idea and ran really far with it. Because he hasn't really done much after this one. And so I got the idea from him, and he's still a good buddy of mine. And I was like, oh, wow, I could have my own room, have my own space. I was definitely wanting that. And I could, and then I also realized, oh, the numbers work a lot better too. And that was how I got smarter in it. And if I never bought the first one, I probably would never have met him because we were both in real estate, which is why we met. And I think it's really important to realize that like your first deal isn't going to necessarily be your best deal. Your first deal is you're going to learn a lot of lessons, but half of the first deal is just getting in the game to show everybody else that you're credible and you're even worth talking to.
Yeah, 100%. Craig, talk to us how I know the portfolio has expanded a little bit more, and I believe you're still house hacking. And we spoke a little off camera that you ended up moving out of the Colorado area, but how does it look now?
Yeah, so I house hacked from 2017 to 2022. So that's 6 years of 6 times of house hacking. In that process, I met my wife, and she house hacked twice as well. And so together we've house hacked 8 times and have collected 8 house hack properties, as well as a handful of other non-house hack properties too. And the point of inflection in that time period was after my third house hack, I had about 3,000, maybe 3,500 bucks of passive income. And again, this time I had just met my future wife. She was I don't even know if we were dating yet, but we had just met. And I was like, okay, I think I'm like financially free now. I can graduate from my job at BiggerPockets. And I moved on and I became a real estate agent. And I became Denver's like only, I don't want to say only because it wasn't true about only, but certainly most popular investor friendly real estate agent. And I really helped get that space going. And so then people were coming to me being like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a house hack. I want someone that's been doing it. And I was helping people. And so I was in my first 12 months of being a full-time agent, I think I did around 100 deals. And so that in Denver, which wasn't a cheap market, like I made over 10x. Yeah, over 10x what I was making at BiggerPockets in my first year away from BiggerPockets. And so that is a huge reason why then I was just buying properties with 20% down out of state and built a little bit of a portfolio that way. And yeah, things just kept burning and churning.
Wow. So much to unpack there. And I definitely want to talk about the agent side and why you got licensed. But before I do that, you mentioned that your future wife was house hacking. How did you find your wife and how did that come about in terms of she was already doing what you were doing?
There's 2 versions of this story and she's not here to tell hers. So we met, so I was on the BiggerPockets podcast when my book, The House Hacking Strategy, got released. And she was thinking about investing in Indiana and she was talking to realtors and looking at deals and all that. But then she heard me that I was investing in Denver. And so she had reached out to me to say, hey, I want a house hack in Denver. Can you help me out? So I said, sure. And she was my client first. And so we closed on the house there and things, obviously we just had so much fun together, right? We were like in the car, we wouldn't even talk about real estate this was before COVID when you can actually drive around with your clients. Yeah. And we would talk in the car and very rarely about the houses, just about everything else. And we would laugh and all that. And it just became like and we just never wanted to, it wasn't like a love at first sight. It was just like a best friends at first sight. And then our love for each other just continued to grow by just being best friends. And it's still like that today.
That's so cool.
Marry your best friend. That's the best nugget of the whole show right there.
Seriously. Don't just marry someone that you can laugh with, that you can be friends with, that'll support you, that's open. Yeah, you got to have the right partner. Otherwise, everything falls apart.
For sure. Anna, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say, especially in real estate investing and being a real estate agent, like this is tough. And if you don't have someone that at least is understanding of the schedule and some of the craziness, it can be really rough. So having a shared passion, like that means you guys can do pretty much everything together.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do a lot of stuff together. That's for sure.
Especially getting somebody that's on board with house hacking. I'm doing that with my fiance as well. So I'm right there on the board and making sure that your partner and your spouse are on board with real estate investing. Because if not, that could be a whole nother topic. But I wanted to touch, Craig, you mentioned you got licensed in real estate and we're the Agent to Investor podcast. And Sounded like you had a great first year, which is awesome. But what would you say is like the difference between an investor friendly agent versus just a traditional real estate agent?
So a traditional real estate agent, they're good at negotiating. They're good at doing the deal. They're good at setting expectations. They're good at running comps. They're good at all of that kind of stuff. They probably have some connections, but what they're not good at is they're not good at looking at things without emotion and from like an investor's perspective. I think, not to sound mean, but I think being a traditional real estate agent, while it takes a lot of skill to build relationships and to be trustworthy and to have someone trust you with one of the most important decisions of their life, I think it's immense. And I don't mean that take that for granted at all. But with a investor friendly agent, I think there's a whole nother layer that you got to know about the numbers, how to make the house improve, the appreciation in the area, what type of people is going to be there. Like, there's a lot more that you need to know and need to understand and need to coach, guide, and mentor when people are forking out oftentimes more than they can technically afford, not from the lender's perspective, but from an actual perspective. They're forking out more than they can afford. And if they can't get these rooms filled or they can't get the tenant on the other side, they're screwed. Right. And so there's a little bit more pressure too, to make sure that you're able to fulfill what your clients need.
Now, do you strictly work with investors? And I ask this because I know as an investor friendly agent now, I don't just work with investors, but I use it to educate buyers in general, which means if they catch on, they're going to buy houses more often than they regularly would. Do you work with just investors, or do you have a portfolio of people, like different kinds of people you work with?
No, we work with everybody for sure. We're actually trying to not necessarily go away from investing, but we're trying to add more to our residential side, because we were probably like 95% investors when we first started. Now we're probably at 70-30, 60-40. So yeah, because again, like everything that I do for my investor, I'm doing for someone that just wants to buy a home. It's just the person that wants to buy a home doesn't care so much about what they can rent the house for and what their Airbnb numbers are.
Yeah, that's fair. I've come to realize with a lot of buyers, and this is just my 2 cents, is they don't know enough about investing to even think about it. But once you start dropping in those breadcrumbs, like maybe they're not interested in investing now, but they look at the property sometimes a little differently than they would otherwise if you didn't get them thinking about, oh, this is just a stepping stone. Like maybe I want to what does my future look like? Like most agents, I don't think do that. They're like, you bought a house, that's great. Hopefully I'll see you again in a couple of years if I remember to follow up.
Yeah, exactly. Not yet. No, even when we with people who are going to buy a home, like a regular home, I still am always like, and hey, if this doesn't work out, it's okay. You won't have to sell because it will still work as a rental, or you could always do it this way or do it that way. There's other ways that we can make this work. So don't feel like this is an end all be all decision. There's plan B, plan C. You don't necessarily need to sell at the bottom or whatever.
So, Craig, what I love about what you're doing is you're helping. We're all in expensive markets, or you were when you were in Colorado, and buying a home is expensive. And I'm a millennial, and I know you're around the same age as me, and people that are looking to buy their first home are struggling just with affordability and with the rates currently. So what I love about you personally, you have your own house hacking experience. Are you helping a lot of first-time home buyers with buying a home as a house hack?
Yeah, I don't want to say in most cases, but in many cases, yeah, a lot of these are first-time home buyers. They're young. They're just like who I was when I was 24, buying my first place, hustling, like wanting to get ahead in life. And those are my favorite people to work with, because they see the big picture. It's not really, I could look on the MLS right now and probably find you 8 to 10 houses that will work perfectly fine. It's not about finding the perfect house and the perfect deal and running the perfect numbers and timing the market just right. If you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. I bought all my houses exactly 1 year on the year. I didn't wait. And I actually wrote a blog post for BiggerPockets a while back about what happens to like person A if they buy one house a year on the year for 10 years versus person B who buys a really good deal every 18 months for that same 10 years. And I'll just jump to the end of that story. The way it works is the person with that house hacked every year and didn't really get a great deal ended up $1 million richer at the end of the 10 years. And so it's really not about finding the best deal. When you're house hacking and when you're doing buy and hold stuff, you just got to get in and just hold it for as long as possible. And we tell a lot of our clients, like, it's funny, like people probably call us bad realtors, but when someone comes to us to sell, we're like, hold on a second. Can you hold on to it? can you rent it? Because I think all wealth is built in real estate by just holding on, just literally do nothing, just maintain it. And yeah, so that's where that comes from.
I think that's also one of the biggest difference between an investor-friendly agent and a traditional agent is that a good one will be like, are you sure you want to sell that? And other agents will be like, what is wrong with you? That's a listing.
Yep.
But you're building
Totally.
a reputation.
Yeah, it's my mindset has always been just deliver value to people, put yourself in their shoes, be their fiduciary, do what's genuinely best for them, and God will reward you. Like if you're just chasing one little commission, bro, like your one house sale is going to be like, let's say 10 or 15 grand, but you saying, oh no, don't sell, but here, let me give you some property management contacts, right? Let me share with you different ways that we can actually just have you hold on and you can build more wealth as long as you can afford the next one. They're going to buy the next house with me. And they're probably going to have 3 or 4 friends sellers aren't stupid. They know that you make money when they sell a house. They know that I withdrew a $10,000 or $15,000 commission, earn their trust, and now they're going to refer me to probably 4, 5, 6 other people. And the massive amount of our business these days is referrals.
Yeah, it's the long game as an agent, also in investing. And I think I saw on your social media, you made a clip about your first house hack and what it's worth now. You mind giving like the cliff notes of the power of actually house hacking to begin with and what it looks like today?
Yeah. And of course, we've had unprecedented appreciation in the last 7, 8 years. But at the time in 2017, this is what was saying, and this is what was happening. These are what the news headlines were. It was real estate is as high as it's ever been since 2008. We're likely coming to a crash very soon. Don't buy real estate, blah, blah, blah. That's it. And it's true because my buddy, he bought a duplex 3 blocks down from me for half the price that I bought mine for. Like 2 years, not even 2 years prior.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh my gosh, am I buying at the top? I totally felt that way. But I was just like, you know what? Again, I'm young. Even if I bought at the top, I've got a lot of years ahead of me for it to come back up. God willing. And so I bought that house at $385,000. Now it cash flows me about $1,000 a month, and it stays that way. I just rent it out as a long-term rental now, top and bottom. Have a property manager on it. It's pretty passive for me. And that property, I had it appraised 3 years ago, and it appraised at $800,000. So sometimes the appraisals on refinances and stuff aren't super accurate, to be honest. They usually go a little on the higher end. So maybe it's 700, but either way, wealth is really made through holding on and through the appreciation of real estate. Not even really the cash flow. Like the cash flow is, I would say the cash flow is cute. The cash flow gives you a little bit more freedom. Cash flow really just helps you maintain the property so that you can experience that appreciation. And I was just listening to a guy earlier today. He's the chief economist at NAR. I forget his name, but he knows a thing or two about data and home ownership. And to date, like the net worth between a renter and a homeowner, the difference is like $400,000. Yeah. And Warren Buffett, who is obviously, you guys all know who Warren Buffett is. He's a big stock market guy, right? He said that the third best investment he's ever made, third best performing real estate he's ever made, has been his house in Omaha and his house in California. Those are the 2 best investments top 3 investments he's ever had. The other top 2 was his engagement ring to his wife, and then his engagement ring to his second wife after his first wife passed away. So real estate is essentially, and I would agree with that, going back to what we said before, like your person is going to be like your rock. But yeah, like real estate, it just works, man. It just works.
For sure. And Craig, I want to touch on, I see your sign right behind you, the FI team, and you since you started your own real estate team in terms of investor-friendly agents. You mind talking about that and what your main goal is?
Yeah. So our big, hairy, audacious goal is to reduce the U.S. retirement age from 65 to 55 by helping people achieve financial independence through real estate. After that year of when I did 100 deals my first year, you can imagine I was pretty burnt out. And again, I had no mentors. I didn't know the systems. I had nothing. I didn't know anything. And so I started having agents come underneath me, and it was actually my clients that turned into my agents. And I started training them up to become investor-friendly agents, and we started building a team. And in 2021 and 2022, anybody with a pulse could have probably built a real estate team and been pretty successful. Like, it was very easy to sell real estate at that time. When the markets shifted, we realized we had massive holes in our bucket, like massive holes in our bucket. And so I really had to go in and fix a lot of stuff with the team in terms of payout structure, in terms of admin costs, in terms of a lot of different things. And yeah, so we grew to a team of about 20, 22 at our peak, maybe. We've regressed down to probably 6 at our lowest agents. Now we're probably hovering around the 15 mark. And a big part of that was we partnered with a company called Place a little over a year ago. And that's been revolutionary for us. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of them.
No? What's that?
Oh, so Place it was started by the number 1 and number 2 realtor in the country, Ben Kinney and Chris Suarez. Many of you may have heard of them. And it was made to be the backbone for the top 1% teams in the US. And so basically you partner with Place, and it's a true partnership. And you basically then get all of the systems, all of the training, all of the guidance, all of the coaching, all of the accountability, everything, all the tools of the top 1% teams, so that we can actually have our agents, brand new agents now, can come partner with us, get into production in their first 12 months that they're doing 12 deals. And so in our market, that's $100,000 first year as a real estate agent. Most real estate agents close 3 deals their first year, and we basically partner with them so that these agents can not just be agents burning and churning for the next deal, but actually build a real business that as they grow and do more deals, they can eventually walk away from. So they can basically have a business that's like somewhat passive, and they can live their lives. And that was if you haven't heard of Place yet, you will have absolutely heard of them probably in a few years from now.
Oh, awesome.
I was just like, I got to look them up I'm like, I got to Google search this and figure this out, because that sounds very interesting. I don't have a team yet, but I like the concept of passive income.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to build wealth with them too. And it works when you've got a lot of people coming together. And all these stats I'm seeing is last year, 2024, 70% of real estate transactions were done by people on teams. That blew my mind. I couldn't believe that. And so I think really the industry is moving towards like not really the individual agent. Like, you'll still have them, right? Your mom and pop people that just want to close 10 or 12 deals a year. But the big players are going to be part of something bigger. And it happens in every industry, right? If every real estate agent is their own little business, and in any industry ever, it matures, the little guys get scooped up by the big guys, whether they acquire them, they join the team, or they fail. So it kind of just makes sense with the way the industry is going.
Yeah. And everybody has different knowledge bases, and like you come together and you have a collective like brain that you can tap into and learn faster. Like, why reinvent the wheel when you have other people to learn from?
100%.
Now, Craig, do most of your teammates own real estate themselves? Because I know I forget the stat, but a lot of agents don't actually own real estate. They're doing all these transactions, but they don't actually own the real estate.
Pretty much everyone on our team is a real estate investor, or at least wants to be a real estate investor. And we don't allow anybody that just wants to be a real estate investor help our investor clients. They'll only be able to help our residential, because if you're working with an investor, you've got to have at least one investment property on our team. And so, yeah, I would say maybe 80% of our team has at least one investment property, and the other 20% are young people that are in the hustle grind mode, and they just haven't been able to, either they're waiting their 2 years as an agent, or they just haven't been able to accumulate enough cash yet.
Gotcha. So I know you briefly talked about this earlier, and you talked about being an author with BiggerPockets. So that is really cool. I love the book, and thank you for signing it when we met in BPCon.
Yeah.
But how did that come about? Did you always want to be an author, or were you just talking about what we just talked about, and you were like, maybe I should write a book?
Yeah. So I did always want to write a book. Not always, but as I was listening to all the podcasts, and I felt like I had something that a lot of people didn't have, but maybe, I don't know, but at least when I was 24 and on top of the world, I felt that way. And when I started interviewing for BiggerPockets, Scott Trench, who became a mentor of mine, he wrote Set for Life. Set for Life was just coming out, his book. And I was like, that is so cool. And I told him, I want to write a book someday. And he said, and so then when I got the job at BiggerPockets, he's like, do you still want to write a book? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, here's what I did. I wrote for the BiggerPockets blog for 2 years on my own time without a dollar. And then I got the book deal. And he told me, I cannot promise you a book deal, but if you do that, your odds go up, and you still may not receive anything, by the way. But yeah. And so that's what I did. I wrote for the blog post. I wrote for the BiggerPockets blog on my own time for 2 straight years and didn't receive anything. And then finally, they wanted to release a book on house hacking, but I wasn't the first option. Brandon Turner was the first option, but Brandon was he just was starting Open Door Capital with his mobile home parks and all that. And he was like, couldn't give probably 2 craps about house hacking at that point. So then Scott Trench actually was the number 2 person to write the house hacking strategy. But there's something that really tough that happened with Josh Dorkin, the founder of BiggerPockets. And so he had to step away. And then Scott came in to fill that role as CEO. So then he didn't have time to write the book. And so then I was third in line, and I was like, heck yeah, let's go. So that's how that kind of came to be. And yeah, I wrote the book, and yeah, that was a huge inflection point. And that was a big reason why I did so much business in that first year, because God made this time. I didn't time this at all. But when that book came out in the end of 2019, I had got my license just a couple months prior to that. And I didn't even know about it, but I would go on probably 100 plus podcasts advertising the book. And then at the same time saying, oh, and by the way, I'm also an agent in Denver. And so I just had people reaching out to me in swarms.
I will say it wasn't just by luck, though. Like, you put in the hustle, you put in the work. Like, a lot of people see stories and they're like, oh, they're so lucky. But you wrote for 2 years without anything in return. So you put a lot of effort into making that happen. It wasn't just, there was some divine intervention, but you put everything in place to make it work.
For sure. Yeah. What do they say? Luck is where preparation meets opportunity.
Yep.
And so it wasn't lucky that I got a job at BiggerPockets. I applied to 250 jobs. I read every single one of their books and listened to like 400 of their podcasts before the interview, right? Like, I was preparing and I didn't know what I was preparing for, but I liked it. And so then the opportunity came. And so the same thing, right? It's the whole thing of figure out what other people aren't willing to do and how can you make yourself stand out. The worst thing you can do is do the same thing as everybody else. That's why I probably would never become a real estate agent. I used to laugh at real estate agents, to be honest. I never wanted to become one because I was like, I don't see how anyone's any different. But then you find a way to be different and you can now capture a massive market share that like no one else can live up to.
Yeah. So I might have missed it. So you did the house hacking, you were working at BiggerPockets. At what point did you decide, was it because you wanted to buy your own properties? What made you decide, okay, I'm going to be a real estate agent now?
Yeah, exactly. Because I wanted to buy my own. I did the math and I was like, okay, it's going to cost me like $2,000 the first year to get my license. And it's probably like $500 to $1,000 a year after that to just maintain it. And every time I close if I close one deal, it's $10,000. Well, that math works out. So that's all I did. And that's all I did for the first 2 years. I got my license actually. Now that I'm actually remembering more, I actually lied. I didn't get it a couple months before the book. I got my license in 2017, right after I bought my first deal. And then I bought my second deal, the 5-bed, 2-bath one, by myself. That was the first deal I did on my own. And then the third deal was the second deal I did with myself. And then one of my buddies wanted me to help him buy his first house hack. And it was tons of fun. And so then I was like, oh, and then I made $10,000. And after having a bunch of fun, I was like, that was like the best $10,000 I ever made. Continued to do that multiple times over and over again.
And now you love your job.
And now it's fun. Yeah.
It's so funny you mentioned that you made fun of real estate agents. I was the same way. I naturally got into it because my dad was doing fix and flips and he was like, Nico, just get your license. We can keep it all in house. So similar to what you're saying. And now I love it. You got your niche. You're working with house hackers, with investors, and Anna and I are working to do the same here locally. And I think it's great once you can stand out from other agents. That's the main goal.
For sure. 100%.
So we are running close on time. We're going to hit you with a few final questions, Craig, but you've been in the business for almost a decade. So I'm just curious, what is some advice that you would give your younger Craig, what you know now in real estate?
Oh man,
I can't
words.
tell. I was going to say, I can't
bro.
tell if his math was wrong or if you just made a realization and you just realized, holy crap, I don't know which one happened there.
I think his mouth was wrong. I'm not going to ever.
Oh man.
I don't think I could do anything for a decade. That's too long. I'm not old
But
enough
if you
to
like
be any.
it,
Oh, I love it. I could do it for a decade. I guess I'm almost there. Thanks, Nico. But I just feel like I'm too young to have done anything for that long. I'm going to keep being young in my heart. What I would tell my younger self is don't be afraid to. One thing a mentor told me was to not partner. and to just to kind of keep yourself because it keeps things simple and all that. And he was giving me the best genuine advice because he still to this day has not partnered with anybody and has kept it pretty simple. I think that limited me in my ability to grow and scale because I knew I did something that worked like tremendous amounts, probably like multi-million dollar lack of action on my part, especially given the knowing now the appreciation run that has come up that could have happened. And so, yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid to take the risk. And if something scares you, and just because you get a piece of advice from a mentor, just because they are older and wiser doesn't necessarily mean their advice is best for you. Take the advice, really sit on it, really think about it. Are they where you want to be? Does it totally align? And then, but know that advice is not something you need to take. And that's kind of how I felt going in. And yeah, so I would tell myself to go after it, go all in, and don't be afraid to partner because what I was doing was working and not many people knew about it and it was unique.
I love that. Now, we talked a lot about real estate and house hacking and things like that, but what are some things that you and your wife like to do outside of real estate? What are some hobbies that you guys like to do?
Bro, we're like 30, so we go to Costco, we go to coffee shops. Let's be real. We like to walk our dogs. We live a pretty chill, simple life. We live on a little bit of a homestead, so we've got chickens and goats are coming and gardening and all that. Personally, like I like to do this stuff. I like to golf. I coach baseball. I like to play pickleball, like that kind of stuff. She's not as much into the sports stuff, but yeah, we try to keep a decent balance. We're both in the gym and exercising a good bit. It's important to like keep yourself physically fit. Mentally fit for us, that's going to church, being involved in the church and all that, as well as staying motivated by working and all that. So yeah, that's kind of what our life is these days.
I love it. I love it. And I know we spoke a little off camera about an event that you have coming up. You mind sharing what that is and when it is?
Yeah. So if you are interested in co-living at all, so this is literally the strategy that got me to financial independence in less than 3 years. It also led my business partner to financial independence in less than 3 years. And it's a way to cash flow in markets that you don't think you can cash flow in. And in markets you can cash flow in, it increases the cash flow by 2 or 3x. And so we're throwing the first ever co-living conference. It's going to be in Denver, June 6th and 7th. And it's the first ever one. So we are making tickets as cheap as possible. Right now, tickets are $500. But if you use the code, I love Craig, which I did not make that up. I like cringe every time I say it, but I love Craig. You'll get a discount for $200. So $200, and we figure most people are going to get the discount.
There you go.
It's going to be super good. We have the president of Pad Split there. We've got my buddy Sam Wiegert, who's really spearheading the co-living space as well. I'm going to be there. Grant's going to be there. BiggerPockets just released a book called Co-Living Cash Flow with my buddy Miller McSwain. He's going to be there. So if you're interested at all in co-living, this year is going to be the cheapest it's ever going to be. So get out to Denver. It will be great to meet you in person, and we're excited to see you. And use that code I love Craig for your
there we go. I love Craig. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes. And where can people reach out to you, Craig, if they have any questions or if they're interested in investing in your markets? Do you have any socials?
Yeah, you can reach out to me on Instagram. The Fi Guy is my Instagram. I answer most of my messages. If you're a legit person, I will answer you. and yeah, so yeah, hopefully, feel free to reach out, DM me anytime, and always happy to help out your audience and help out anybody, that's looking to get into it.
Awesome. So that's going to do it for another episode of the Agent to Investor podcast. You can reach out to me at N Garcia Official, Nico Garcia, and you can reach out to Anna at
I'm Anna Bylik _realtor on Instagram and Anna Bylik everywhere else. And I'm putting in for people to comment to have Craig come back, because if they can't make it to the conference, I have so many questions. We went over your story and the overview and the power of house hacking and co-living, but no questions now about I want to know, how did you keep people from fighting? Because I feel like you got to be a house mother if you've got that many people living together. So I say we need to have you back if you have time for us.
Yeah, I'm always down to chat. So that's fun. And yeah, a lot of those questions will be answered at the conference for sure. But if you can't make it, either way, I'm always down to come back and just get more people involved in this beautiful investment strategy.
Or if you had to recommend a book for people to read, what book would you recommend they read again?
The house hacking strategy. That's like the OG co-living book that honestly didn't mean for it to be that way. It was just the only thing remotely close. Now Miller just released the book Co-Living Cash Flow on BiggerPockets. I have not read that yet, but I'm sure Miller is a great guy, knows a lot. I don't think BiggerPockets would intentionally publish a bad book. So I imagine that one would be pretty good too.
Yeah, but we can't speak to that one, so we'll just promote the book that you are.
How's second? Okay. You gave me like a nice slow pitch softball and I just swung and missed. Yeah. Maybe fouled it off, but yeah.
No, you're good.
Well,
I was just, if anybody's interested, there's so many avenues. I guess is what I was trying to point out. There's a conference. If we have you back on, the people who don't like to read and can't make the conference can listen to one of our podcasts or two. Wait, you have a podcast too, right? Is it all about?
Yeah, we have a podcast called Invest to Fi, and it's all about early stage investors, like here in their journey. Many of it's early stages. They're not all early stage, but many of them are. And so, yeah, definitely check out our podcast, Invest to Fi. That's been great.
Okay.
And yeah, check that out.
Cool.
You can always audiobook the books, but yeah.
I'm trying to toss you as many softballs as possible.
I appreciate you, Anna. Yeah.
Craig's got so much going on. He forgets everything. So
Yeah.
thank you, Craig. And tune in to the next episode.
See you guys.